won't be any specifics as to who and where. So
All right.
discretion is in place.
We are
If it
going.
helps, Skip, I've had this last week I was checking out the young psychics.
The
The
young
young psychic,
psychics.
the young, like not the young as in Carl Gustav Jung, but
Uh,
young like 20 somethings that are psychics. I had a medium who was doing like a collective reading,
uh-huh.
and I was trying to remain very neutral while she was doing readings around the circle. And I just I felt like as if each time that I constrained myself from, from dominating the energy there, that my spirit was the one doing so. And then for the first time in a long time, I did something that's really bad. I played the Ouija board in a cemetery.
There's nothing really bad about that. Nothing really bad about it.
So I didn't really get the answers that I was expecting. So I went to a funeral home and
And at the funeral home?
and I asked because I feel like I hear some haunting noise in my apartment. So I asked the Ouija board, are there spirits around me? And the Ouija board said yes. And then I said, finally, now we're getting somewhere. And then I did, well, how many spirits are there? Changeable. I'm like, okay, how many spirits are there at 9 a.m.? 7. How many
7.
spirits are here at 2 p.m.? 3.
Yeah, they move on.
I'm like, when are they gonna pay the rent?
Yeah, you got to keep track. Make sure they're make sure they're punctual. Keep track, because it's like attendance is mandatory.
Yeah, just remember that that you have to live in the real world. They don't.
Right.
And you have to live in the physical world. They do not have to.
Well, and one thing too is if you have a Roomba, don't get a Ouija board. If you have a Ouija board, carpet, because the Roomba will summon demons.
What is the Roomba?
It's
The
that
little
little circular
vacuum?
vacuum that runs around the floor. So it goes across your
Oh,
Ouija carpet, and uh-oh.
And it gets stuck at certain points.
Oh my God, I went to
oh
Amazon and
boy.
got more vacuum bags.
Yeah. Well, one time when I got my knee replaced, I was on some really good stuff, I guess. And so I was quite relaxed. And in the middle of the night, I was having a dream as if I was awake, but I had a ball about this big, like a what, a Quidditch board from Harry Potter, and it was tangled with spirits. There were, I don't know, 100 spirits in this ball, and it was hanging right here next to me. And I said, "Wow, that was pretty cool."
Yeah, when the medium kept saying, "Oh, I hear a Sarah, Sarah, Seraphine, Sapphire," and I said to myself, "Oh my gosh, there it is again, the seraphim." So, it's this angel that has this strange shape to it with wings all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that came to my mind was how, when it comes to human existential crises, people tend to lean toward the Greco-Roman mythology,
Mm-hmm.
whereas theological and spiritual belief, people in the Western religions leans so heavily toward the icons of ancient Egyptian theology, which is, yeah, it's mind-boggling for me.
Yeah, well, our ancestors have been aware of those for, I don't know, 100 generations or more.
When you have an awareness of that Egyptian bicameral mind, I mean, the bicameral mind being all of the animals all the time, each one symbolic of another natural feature. It's kind of interesting because when all the animals happen all the time, it's like, maybe I don't need the whole zoo at one time.
Oh, I apologize. Okay. I meant in the hieroglyphs. I'm sorry. So for example, when you see the goddesses with, as you're saying, with the animals, one has wings of a crane, one has wings of a hawk. So the fact that they have wings.
You're right on the money with both, because Hiero, Hiero, like Hierophant, is spirit. So that's, and glyph obviously is a symbol. So it's spirit symbols. And so you had the whole picture. When you said the Egyptian mythology, I mean, the hieroglyphs are just the methodology to express that mythology. So you get the Hiero, the spirit part of the glyph. So I think you're right on the money when you said the Egyptian mythology, hieroglyphs being just simply how they're expressed.
Yep.
Okay, now I see why you look different. I'm so sorry, Skip. Now I see why you look so different. You don't have a beard anymore.
Oh, she got it.
Why do you look so different? I'm so sorry.
No, I love it when that's happening. So funny. People, I have to say, the funniest thing is people come in and they stare. I mean, right here. And you can tell intuitively they know. They completely know. And then the beard was so big and now it's so gone. I think their mind moves on. They look up and go, "Where's your hat?" It's really hilarious because, I mean, you can just see they're there, but they're not. There's not even a trust of the intuition or distrust. It's just so big and so there and not there. They can't see it. So
you're not wearing your hat on the. You're not wearing your hat on the plaza anymore.
I stopped that 2 weeks before the beard dropped.
Oh wow!
I walked out the door. I looked at it and I just went, and that was it. It was just, and not even a thought. It wasn't, change the uniform. It was just, and so it was just that milestone of the moment. I just walked right through. And it's funny. I walked into a shop. A dear friend of mine was there, and I walked past her. She had her back turned and walked into the other room and stood from the side. And she looked over and then she turned away. And then she looked over and then she turned away. And then she walked in and I turned around and she said the funniest thing. She goes, I looked in there and wow, there's that guy has the same beard as Jordan. Oh, and he's wearing those same Nepalese shirts. That's really weird. And then she's like, I've never seen you without your hat. So it was interesting. So I think that was kind of the hat moment, was just the release of the docking clamps and then let the molting slowly begin.
Right. So how late in the season are you going to be able to be on the plaza, and are you going to be in a building?
My question exactly.
Most likely not in the building, but I have heated seat cushions. So as we move colder, it'll be warm tush taro.
Warm tush taro, okay.
Do you have one for your clients?
Oh, I have two of them. Yeah.
Yeah. What about one for your back so your spine stays warm?
My torso is like perpetual heat. So it's feet, hands, and tush. And but no, that's a good point, because I find when I'm sitting on the heated seat, my back actually kind of loosens up a little bit and warms better. But it was 70 here yesterday. Now it's not, this last night it was 31. but again, it's probably already cruising 40s to 50s. So we've got fall really lasting longer, but we'll see what happens. It could get brutal, but
How late in the winter did you go last year? How late did you go?
Intermittently every month. I only got 3 days in December last year. January was 0. February, I think February is out there for about a week. March it started coming back, but the problem really was last year I planned on not working for 3 months, and it really turned more towards 7, and in terms of periods of days. So, but this year, I mean, I'm also turning around to start to set up some teaching gigs, and I have a lot more Zoom clients coming in. So the winter seems to be filling up, just changing seasons in it to work a different way more.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, I worry about you out there in the cold.
Yeah,
okay, so
38, I'm fine.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's good to hear. It's a little cool for my likes. I married the wrong woman actually because she doesn't like the heat, and I don't like the cold. Hold on just a minute. I have to close my door because she's having a Buddhist retreat in the other room. Hold on.
I'm almost always cold. I'll be cold now until June. It's harsh.
Yeah, I'm fine until my fingertips and my toes, and then it just starts to creep.
Yeah, my hands are like ice. I tell my clients, do you have any inflammation? Because I could help you bring that right down.
With the cold?
Yeah, just like, and they're like, that feels so good. And I'm like, you're telling me. Yeah.
Okay, so I've closed the door, and so her coffee in the other room won't bother me. I got my RSV shot after one of the teachers at my school told me that everybody in her family was sick except her because she had a shot. So I said, maybe I better get that. And my health insurance is covering it now. Okay, we are on page 407 of the reader's edition of the Red Book by C.G. Jung. And we're going to start reading and see where that takes us. Okay. But what mystery are you intimating to me with your name, O Philemon? Truly, you are the lover who once took in the gods as they wandered the earth when everyone else refused them lodging. You are the one who unsuspectingly gave hospitality to the gods. They thanked you by transforming your house into a golden temple, while the flood swallowed everyone else. You remained alive when chaos erupted. What it was who served you it was who served in the sanctuary when the people called out in vain to the gods. Truly, it is the lover who survives. Why did we not see that? And just when did the gods manifest? Precisely when Bacchus wished to serve the esteemed guests, her only goose, that blessed stupidity. The animal fled to the gods, who then revealed themselves to their poor hosts, who had given their last. Thus I saw that the lover survives, and that he is the one who unwittingly grants hospitality to the gods. Okay, so this is obviously a reference to the myth of Philemon and Bacchus, and Zeus and Jupiter had come down to earth to walk among people for a period of time, and they looked for a lodging, and nobody would give them a lodging. except for Philemon and Bacchus, who invited them in, and because they were guests, Bacchus was proposing to slay their only goose so that they could feed them, and the goose ran away and went to Philemon, to Jupiter and Zeus, and so Jupiter and Zeus revealed themselves to Philemon and Bacchus. This story also appears in Faustus. I guess it's the second part of Faustus, maybe at the beginning of the second part of Faustus. So I'll give you first comment on it. Sure.
Well, I think what really strikes me is that these two sentences, truly it is the lover who survives. And then she gives her only goose, that he is the one, or they are the ones who unwittingly grant hospitality to the gods. So there's this reciprocality in the giving, where you receive divinity in the powerful witness. And I think that's, to me, the marrow of the matter in this paragraph.
Yeah. And of course, this was a watchword idea for Jung throughout his life. He grokked it when he read Faustus for the first time, and he understood that we live in two worlds, the physical world and the world of the gods, which is the psyche, in the unconscious of the psyche. And if you grant hospitality to the gods by acknowledging their existence, or however you want to say it, to God or to devils, whatever you grant hospitality to, that's what you got. And so the tradition was that Philemon and Bacchus recognized that the gods were powerful and granted hospitality. And of course, Jung had entered in stone above the door of his home, called or not called, God will be present, or the gods will be present. And so, in our physical world, after 1500, from the beginning of the 16th century on, the scientific method was calling out all the myths of religion and saying, well, that's not true, and that's not true. And I'm looking through a telescope, I don't see any God up there. And of course, Galileo Galilei was brought up before the Inquisition of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was trying to hold all of its myths together and saying that they're actually reality, but they didn't have a way to say it properly. Okay, they said it based on their traditional way of saying it, suggesting that the gods are in the physical world, or God is in the physical world, and God is not in the physical world. But nonetheless, the God or gods exist, and they control our lives. And so Galileo was brought up before the Inquisition, and he was told that he had to kneel in front of the inquisitor and put his hand on the Bible and swear that the earth went around the sun, the sun went around the earth instead of the earth going around the sun. And
yeah, we didn't have physics yet.
Pardon?
Didn't have Newtonian gravitational physics yet.
Well, Galileo might have understood it, but they didn't. Yeah. so he gladly kneeled down, put his hand on the Bible, and swore. And this is the Abjuration of Galileo, which you can find on the internet, many places. He swore that the sun went around the earth, knowing that it was not true. And what he also knew was that the Catholic Church kept extremely good records. And of course, the Catholic Church would want to keep this record because it was a famous scientist who was swearing on a Bible that it was all true. And so they didn't execute him. Okay, the Inquisition did not execute him, but they sentenced him to house arrest and told him that he could no longer do astronomy and one other science. And by then, Galileo was then 70 years old, and he had blinded himself by looking through his telescope. And so he didn't care much about looking out at the stars any longer. And he lived 4 more years. And in that 4 years, he invented 2 new sciences. I don't remember both of them, but I do remember one of them, and it was quantum physics. So he invented quantum physics.
Yeah, the connection of all.
Right.
And I think that actually goes back to even simplify what I said about the goose, and giving reciprocally is a divine event. Even more actionably simple, I think the goose then is representative of one's personal value, what's real and true within. And when you give of yourself in a real way, not a pretty way, not even a beautiful way, in a natural way, that is a divine action, just in a mundane sense. And what happens then is how it's received on the other end. You'll see the nature. It's honestly a wonderful forensic. How does someone receive? I mean, everyone can give. That's easy. Receiving requires personal value, to just simply say thank you and receive. So I think the goose and the divinity piece, hospitality, unwittingly grants hospitality to the gods. Well, the hospitality is residing in the dwelling of you, self.
Yeah, right. And the Indians, of course, believe that because they fold their hands and bow to a stranger and say namaste, meaning I'm honoring the God within you, within the other person. And most followers of this channel by now know that I had a run-in with the devil, and my then 22-year-old daughter, on her 22nd birthday, said, "Well, Dad, I'm sorry to say this, but I think you're going to hell." And I said to myself, my God, who teaches a child to say such a thing to a parent, right? And then on the way home from that encounter, Mephistopheles, as I imagined him when I read Faustus in college, jumped into the seat of my car, into the passenger seat. And he didn't say anything, but I said to him, you can have my immortal soul on my death, provided none of my daughters think of that of me for the rest of my life. And he left. And the whole incident probably took 5 seconds. Now, I had a little advantage over Mephistopheles because I had read some Jungian psychology by then, and I knew that he was a figment of my imagination, but he was quite real at the time. And it made me realize how fire and brimstone pastors have scared people into coming back into the church for centuries, because I'm sure many other people have had much worse visions than that. especially before the scientific method came along. And so what we need to realize is that we live in two worlds, and they are both this one, but one of them is the psychological psyche world, and the other one is our physical world. The scientific method applies to our physical world. Religion, philosophy, etc., all apply to our psychological world, our psyche.
So
There's,
with,
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
With Mephistopheles too, I don't want to express any naive hubris, but I do find it hilarious, the old cartoon where, you know, the devil comes to this one guy and he's playing the, you know, immortal soul game and all this and threatening, and the guy goes, dude, I'm not the one who lost my golden fiddle to a hillbilly in Georgia.
Okay,
anyway.
Amela, what were you saying?
Oh, you know, hell is where the party's at, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
According to Dante, that's where the party's at, you know, that's where all the philosophers are at, right? So, I mean,
yeah,
what hell is there than, you know, living in agony, trying to reason with logos and ethos, when people are stoning you to death.
Right.
And the
Yeah,
demons are doing what the demons do, and you're just there, you know, in this sadism, BDSM sadism happening.
Well, and you know, we see this kind of thing going on right now in the war between Israel and Palestine, or Hamas. And you know, they, rather than come to a rational conclusion of that situation in between Israel and Palestine, they just keep duking it out, and every so often, you know, something terrible happens. And so it's incumbent upon us in the United States and other people of the world to find a solution to that, or help them find a solution, because their imagination isn't helping them. Okay, the Israelis and the Palestinians haven't come up with a solution yet, and they need to, because it's completely inappropriate. And we look at Western history and scenes like Jeanne d'Arc and scenes like, you know, burning people at the stake and so on. This is no different than that. You know, those were superstitions that caused people to be burned at the stake. And, you know, probably those were, you know, perfectly fine people. But, you know, crazy ideas got into the heads of the people in power, and they ended up being roadkill, basically. And you know, there are 2 million Palestinians that are caught in the middle of this thing right now. And you know, I can't say how many of them have been
well, there's
involved.
two kinds of people that suffered the most at war.
Yeah.
People that are stubborn and don't want to leave, and people that are too poor to leave. So, you know, if you're too stubborn and you don't want to leave, you know, like some people who had survived the Holocaust or didn't survive the Holocaust,
right,
they just didn't want to leave. They knew that was their home. Or like my ancestors back in Andalus, who didn't want to leave. They didn't want to leave, so they, you know, suffered their fate, which I don't want to get into because it was pretty brutal.
right.
But
Well, and it's been pretty brutal for, you know, probably all the ancestors of Americans. Okay.
Oh yeah.
You know, all the ancestors, going back even to, you know, 35,000 years to the first Native Americans who came to
Mhm.
these North American continent. I'm sure, you don't go across the steppes and eastern Russia to the Bering Land Bridge to come across to North America if something really wasn't pushing you. And so they were obviously those peoples who became what we call today Native Americans, were also, being pushed by the forces of nature, and the forces of nature include human
Yeah.
beings, of course. And
Well,
and
I think
so,
too, the whole
yeah,
power dynamic, if you go back to witch trials and burning people at the stake, um, love of power versus power of love, except also to not be so abstract. That's medical versus healing.
mhm,
And Asclepius, the father of medicine, cool. But that's too in only fact with no heart. Hygeia, his daughter, is well-being. She is very specific. But the thing is, what it
Mhm.
is, she is nature, she works with nature, and she utilizes nature, aka she's an herbalist. She's someone who actually works with the energies and the structures specifically. I mean, geology,
Mm.
nourishment, how things are made, and dosing yourself with more of yourself instead of Asclepius, dosing yourself with some false sense of some fabricated thing for someone else to make money off of. So I think the whole power dynamic there goes to what's your nature? How can you dose yourself with more of yourself? That's Hygeia. That's well-being.
yeah,
Whereas I think we see that in the power dynamics of, someone wants control. Hygeia is about navigation and doesn't give a rat's about control.
right.
And
And
that's the
so,
problem with our generation that the younger generation is dealing with now, because now I'm in my 30s. So now I feel like a señora, as some people would call me. So here I am with my little scarf around my shoulders, sitting in my rocking chair,
you got
watching
a
these
long way to go yet,
children.
Amela.
Watching
So
these
your
young
rocking chair
children
is
who have pushed me aside and said, you know what, now it's our turn. We don't need you to fight for our rights anymore. So I'm like, well, okay, then I will she, her, hers, sit over here and sit in my
no.
rocking chair. But the problem is still the same.
Right.
And
And
we
the fight
still,
doesn't change. Okay, the fight doesn't
we,
change.
the
Yeah.
books are still getting banned. And one of the most disappointing things ever, because I absolutely love history, even though I can't get the dates right,
Time is
is
just I wouldn't worry about that.
well, the timeline is the most important, is what my history professor once said. But you know, it's the critical race theory that
Yeah.
kind of upsets me, because when I did my blood work, I had to do while I was in gestation, when I was pregnant with my child, and my OBGYN did the blood work on me, and she analyzed my ethnicity.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh man, why am I more of this and less of that? And oh my God, I'm that much percent African. That explains the curly little hairs in my head.
Mhm.
Um, but this is important in a way, but also I understand why so many politicians would be against it. Besides racism and ethnocentrism, one of the reasons why is probably because it would bring more violence and hatred. But in a way, it's also important because Alaska and Russia are just a finger
Yeah.
apart,
The illusion.
So, where does humanity come from? And there's so many different theories. And growing up, I've heard people from my generation in like high school and college say like, oh, well, actually, the world is really African. We're all Africans, and white people are extraterrestrial aliens, and they're not from here, and y'all came out here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but what about the Asians and the Latinos? And
Yeah.
then the Asians are saying, well, people are dragons or people are snakes, and then there's people that are bunnies, so we're animals. And
Well, a lot of people had a lot of cockamamie ideas over the years, but at this point we have book banning doesn't work because all of our children have, or most children in the West have smartphones, and all the banned books are online. I've even read Animal Farm myself.
not all of them.
Into
Well,
this YouTube channel, and
in terms of history and the timeline, fact structures legally in life, either way, fact structures are just that, structures, and structures are fabricated. They're designed. They're made.
Right.
The problem
They're
is
railroad tracks.
anything that's made is not necessarily unnatural, but it's not complete. So it's always leading to a generative something else. And to me, people start talking about, well, this and this, and history repeats itself. To me, it's just like relating. It's okay, great. Nothing great begins without a little controversy. So we just had a little controversy and we got through it. So shall we move on and move on to something great? Everyone keeps residing in easy of, oh, it's always bad. You got to keep moving forward. And instead of this, oh no, I'm scolded in a detention hall. No, you're not. You're an adult. There is no detention hall. I mean, you have to take responsibility.
Okay, well,
Kathy, you're muted. Email Charlie Chaplin.
Well, I guess
okay. Anybody
sorry.
with a little bit of education knows that we all descend from African roots, and we all are human ancestors passed through a time when there were only 2,000 human beings on the planet, and that we can now prove through our own DNA. So let us move on, because we're talking about the psyche, not about
Charles Darwin.
yeah, not about Darwin, and not about DNA research, which is really new since
geneticists,
geneticism, and it's freaking out a lot of people. But so the first paragraph here that we read was the story of Philemon and Bacchus. Now I'm going to read on. Truly, O Philemon, I did not see that your hut is a temple, and that you, Philemon and Bacchus, serve in the sanctuary. This magical power allows itself to be neither taught nor learned. Okay, I'll read that once more. This magical power allows itself to be neither taught nor learned. Either one has it or does not have it. Now I know your final mystery. You are a lover. You have succeeded in uniting what has been sundered. That is, binding together the above and below. Have we not known this for a long time? Yes, we knew it. No, we did not know it. It has always been this way, and yet it has never been thus. Why did I have to wander so long on such long roads before I came to Philemon? If he was going to teach me what has been common knowledge for ages. Alas, we have known everything since time immemorial, and yet we will never know it until it has been accomplished. Who exhausts the mystery of love?
My only real comment there is it reminds me of the architect Louis Kahn, and he said, what has always been, what is has always been, and what will be has always been.
Right.
And I I always add to that my own of each birth is brilliant in its age.
Right. And so Morningstar here says, I'm 25% berserker on my grandmother's side. And now that you know that, it's not necessarily necessary to be that anymore. Okay, let me read on. Under which mask, O Philemon, are you hiding? You did not strike me as a lover, but my eyes were opened, and I saw that you are a lover of your soul, who anxiously and jealously guards its treasure. There are those who love men, and those who love the souls of men, and those who love their own soul. Such a one is Philemon, the host of the gods. You lie in the sun, O Philemon, like a serpent that coils around itself. Your wisdom is the wisdom of serpents, cold with a grain of poison, yet healing in small doses. Your magic paralyzes and therefore makes strong people who tear themselves away from themselves. But do they love you? Are they thankful, lover of your own soul? Or do they curse you for your magical serpent power? They keep their
Poison.
distance.
Poison, not power. Magical serpent, poison.
Okay. Or do they curse you for your magical serpent power? Poison, right? Poison. They keep their distance, shaking their heads and whispering together. Are you still a man, Philemon, or is one not a man until one is a lover of one's own soul? You are hospitable, Philemon. You took the dirty wanderers unsuspectingly into your hut. Your house then became a golden temple, and did I really leave your table unsatisfied? What did you give me? Did you invite me for a meal? You shimmered, multicolored, and inextricable. You shimmered, multicolored, and inextricable. Nowhere did you give yourself to me as prey. You escaped my grasp. I found you nowhere. Are you still a man? Your kind is far more serpent-like. I sought to grab hold of you and tear it out of you, since the Christians have learned to devour their God. And how long will it take for what happens to the God also to happen to man? I look into the vast land and hear nothing but wailing, and see nothing but men consuming each other. O Philemon, you are no Christian. You did not let yourself be engaged and did not engorge me. Oh, you did not let yourself be engorged and did not engorge me. Because of this, you have neither lecture halls nor columned halls teeming with students who stand around and speak of the master and soak up his words like the elixir of life. You are no Christian and no pagan, but a hospitable, inhospitable one, a host of the gods, a survivor, and an eternal one, the father of all eternal wisdom. Okay, I'll stop there for a moment. Go ahead.
Yeah, how long will it take for what happens to the God devouring itself to happen to people, to man? I mean, it's self-devouring, and part of that is natural in terms of the creation destruction of how life continues. But at the same time, when you have this devout addiction to certainty, basically, then
Right.
the right and wrong just topples back and forth, and instead of building something wonderful with both you disparage and deteriorate with an either or. I mean, you don't have to being right, being correct. It's not overrated, but at the same time, because you have to be firm in your resolve, and that means you mean it. It's real to you. It's of value. But with all the superficial politics bantering. I really just look at, U.S. politics. I'd rather take a look at British Parliament. All the yelling and screaming, that's a little more honest. For all of them. But here it's trying to fit, finish, and polish, and who can outdo the mud I found from someone else. I'm like, from my perspective, just grow a damn lotus out of the mud.
Right.
It's
so Richard's question here on YouTube is a pregnant one at the very least. What exactly were Jung's magic powers, other than conversing with spirits others can't see? Jung's magic powers are myriad. I don't think they can be defined. Here in the Red Book, we are experiencing along with him his first realization of these facts. And so one of his magic powers is that we're now, 62 years after his death, and we're here talking about him every morning or every Sunday morning. And he draws an audience every Sunday morning, and including you, Richard, by the way.
Well, and I love that you said that.
And that's magic. That's a magic power.
Well, I love that you said the myriad of magical powers. And I think, to speak to that, from my perspective, he had an indefatigable sense of self coupled with an indomitable spirit. This was not a man who's going to win or lose. He's going to live it his way, and he's going to do it. The fact that he didn't pick the fights with the ecclesiastical structures, he continued to write them letters.
Yeah.
To me, that was a strategic self-protection of all this work he needed to do. He didn't need to be distracted by all that monkey business. So, instead of calling to war, he kept trying to call to connect. But I think indefatigable self and indomitable spirit. And that makes, I look at Anais Nin, I look at Joan Didion, people like that, whether I agree with the politics or not, that's them. That you get them. And I think that's an intense powerhouse of value.
Right. So,
For
here.
me,
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think there's a word in here that is a weapon, and it's the word love.
Mm-hmm.
So, according to the Greeks, there are many forms of love. So I would be very careful, Mr. Jung or Dr. Jung, of how you use the word love, because it could be a love that is just a love where you love something and you don't expect any kind of reciprocal love, or a devoted love, or a manic love. So there are different types of loves here, and so this is a little red flag there for me.
I think the word magic is being somewhat vilified as well.
Sure.
And that it also has, a myriad of meanings.
Surely.
Well, and I think also he's so complete. I have to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt, when he said a lover of one's own soul. That's agape love, it's storge love, it's filial love, it's eros love. I think it's all of it. And so, rather than, I think, being careful, I don't want to issue Carl Jung a corrective of, be careful of that power. I think the lesson here is no, command with all that power, all of them.
Yeah.
Especially with self, because you have to have it all, or you have imbalanced, limited contents.
Well, and I found a magic power here, because when I got started in this effort years ago, I thought I could make some money on the internet. That didn't really prove to be true. I earn about $100 every 2 months from Amazon and from not from Zoom, but from Amazon.
YouTube.
yeah, from YouTube. I earn about $100 every 2 months. They send me $100, which by no means covers my costs of keeping my MailChimp going and every other darn thing that is involved. And I simply learned that I have to give that up. And I gave that up long ago. And I find that it's just as satisfying to do it without income from it. And if anything, I'm one of the main philanthropists behind our confluences. And I never take anything out of them. I mean, we have our price, which, just barely covers our costs, actually. I mean, I do accept reimbursement for my living expenses while at Mount Madonna, but that's the only thing. And that and for transportation costs, which I provided in this last time, but I did not accept anything to cover my other expenses, which were substantial. And I don't, I take nothing out of it. Okay, I eschew anything. So if there's any net profit after those expenses, which I think it's fair for our organizers to have their lodging expenses covered. Aside from that, nothing, we take nothing out of it. We put everything into it. We spent a year planning it, and so on. And yet we know it's significant. And Jung knew that what he was doing was significant. And he knew that it would take a long time for people to start understanding it. And, Edward Edinger, who's one of my heroes, spent 40 years interpreting Jung for a layman. And he wrote 17 books, all of which are recommendable. And by his work, he explained what Jung was up to. Otherwise, I don't know if I ever would have gotten it. I mean, I get it now, but I wouldn't have without the help of Edward Edinger. But Edinger commented that Jung's mind was way ahead of everybody else in terms of what his thinking was, and so on. And he couldn't be bothered with stopping long enough to explain what he was doing. Okay, he just had to do. And his was not to reason why, his was but to do and die. And so he recognized that. Okay. And he moved along. And so let's see. Richard says, I'm here because I've had a lot of supernatural experiences, and thus is the only piece I can at least get some familiar lingo. And I do believe in all the occult good and bad. I easily relate to all of it. And so thank you for sharing that, Richard. I'm going to read on here now. I'm not.
Before
yeah,
we
go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So on 407, where he says you are a lover, you have succeeded in uniting what has been split apart. That is binding together the above and below. So what stood out for me is how an individual goes to their holy temple, like a mosque or a church. And, in addition to what we spoke about last week about, that's why people congregate in these holy spaces to repent for their sins.
Truly.
So, how much love is there? When I say that, because love again is a perception based upon one's individual experiences. And that's what Jung talks a lot about in the Red Book. He validates that our experiences are what create our conscious, and that our subconscious is a reflection of our soul. So the physical world and the non-physical realm. And so, for example, now I really like also how he mentioned way before in the conception of God, when he talks about the book of Matthew, in which Judas betrays his best friend, who he loved so dearly, for silver, for some money. And so, love is it an emotion? Is it a devotion? What is the meaning? How does an individual hold into that meaning? How does a person as themselves, not collectively, but as an individual, when an individual is in individuation of the self, creating that spiritual self, having that spiritual revelation or enlightenment of self, how do they define the word love, and how genuine is that word? Because I can love Carl Gustav Jung, but in a certain way.
Yeah.
I can love my mom, but in a certain way. And
Right.
the way that I like my boyfriend, I cannot like Jung and my mom, because it's a totally different, intimate relationship. So
Surely.
it's,
So
yeah,
the
it's
answer to
tricky.
the answer to your question is yes. Okay. It's all of those things. And all of us define love for ourselves, okay, from our heart. And yes, love is all those things and much more. And as Richard says, I like Jung, how he tries to explain a cult. Wait a minute. He said something here that it was Michelle. She said, I admire Jung, how Jung knows exactly where he ends and the other begins, and many other things, right? And so here in the Red Book, what we're having is Jung's final, his initial revelation. Okay, he probably had lots of other revelations in the 50 years or so that he lived, 45 years he lived after the Red Book period. But all of a sudden at age 37 or so, 38, all of a sudden, bang, everything that he had experienced up to then came together in this, most of it came together in this 1 month period. And he worked on it for 15 years, worked on the Red Book itself for 15 years. And he realized in order to talk about these things at all, he was going to have to spend more than one lifetime. And so, to his credit, he did that, which was an incredible act of love, not only for himself, but for all of us too, because he gave it to the world. And, he held back the Red Book because he said, who would understand it? Who would understand it in 1961 when he was dying? He simply, he knew it was there. He had obviously written it for publication because he had gone to such great effort to preserve it in this in this red book, and to do it in calligraphy to show how his reverence toward it. And he had done all these paintings and so on. And so obviously he realized it was divinely inspired, but he couldn't, if he tried to explain it then, you know, somebody would have pulled him up before some inquisition. And, you know, but what he managed to do was play the role of a hermit. He ended up, you know, he, for all intents and purposes, he was practicing psychiatry, and nobody was very interested in that. But what he was doing in Bollingen, in this place, which he built with his bare hands, with the aid of a few laborers, there, he was doing things that he just couldn't explain it to people in his time. He knew he couldn't explain it to people in his time. And I think what he underestimated was how quickly people would get it. Okay. And you know, I know in my case, I started reading Jung in 87, and I was, you know, starting to get it in a very rudimentary way through 2009. So that was 22 years I was reading it and getting little pieces here and there, and all of those were helping me. But when I read the red book, I said, aha, now I get it. And so more power to Sonu Shamdasani for making it available to us, because without his love and dedication, Sonu Shamdasani is a very retiring, introverted man. He doesn't seem to want to talk to others much, but he did this act of love, which now has encompassed 23 years of his life, where he first made the red book available. That took 13 years to get it together and get it published, and then he put another 10 years into the black books because of their significance. And so there's an act of love. Boy, oh boy, there's definitely an act of love.
I think that brings up love, birth, truth, these things grow, and you don't make them. I mean, when someone is pregnant and the child is gestating in the womb, well, you don't prove it. You don't right or wrong it. You grow it. And you don't know what you're going to grow into being, but you live it into being all along the way. So the same with love, and the same then to me, I kind of feel like love is grown and power is picked off the tree that is grown. Now, it's what you do with the power. Do you turn around and nourish with currency of value, or do you turn around and try to rule and control? So, I mean, navigational nourishment versus juvenile power of control. I mean, so it's interesting to me here, Jung's work, all that is just a lead up to, I feel Jung took all those 20 volumes and all those letters and all of his work. It was in his womb, publicly, privately, and he respected himself and his work enough that who will get this? Well, no one can get this until he's complete and he's finished. And by, the last breath, 2 words, last breath, then it's born and into the world of the work. And so I think he respected the process of his work enough to keep it growing, gestating.
Okay, it cut off, Jordan, so we missed after you said who would get this, who can get this, and then anything you said after that was
simple, just who can get this, who would get this. No one could get this because he respected it to keep it in the womb of his process. And then last breath, he dies, and then it's birthed into the world. And I think that that's an important concept with, you don't intellectually make things into being. you live them into being. So I think that's an important key concept there with that long form, a whole lifetime opus of his work, that you really don't get the birth until all of it's done.
Richard said, I had a brief vision 3 weeks ago. I was in purgatory and I saw Jung first as a man walking very shakily with a cane, but then he was transformed into a large hill with glasses and a mustache. Yeah, Morningstar says Sisyphus Jung. You know, he had a few experiences like Sisyphus, where Sisyphus was the Greek character who kept pushing a boulder up a hill, but it kept getting away from him and going back down, and he'd have to start over.
Well, there's the Sisyphus cartoon that Sisyphus in the modern world is Sisyphitness. So he's making a how to increase your endurance with Sisyphus. It's called Sisyphitness. So
there you go, Sisyphitness. And
at least it was just a stone and not Solomon stone.
Right. So anyway, let me read on. But did I really leave you unsatisfied? No, I left you because I was really satisfied. Yet what did I eat? Your words gave me nothing. Your words left me to myself and my doubt. And so I ate myself. And because of this, O Philemon, you are no Christian, since you nourish yourself from yourself and force men to do the same. This displeases them most, since nothing disgusts the human animal more than itself. Because of this, they would rather eat all crawling, hopping, swimming, and flying creatures, yes, even their own species, before they nibble at themselves. But this nourishment is effective, and one is soon satiated from it. Because of this, O Philemon, we rise satiated from your table. Your way, O Philemon, is instructive. You leave me in a salutary darkness, where there is nothing for me to either see or look for. You are no light that shines in the darkness, no savior who establishes an eternal truth and thus extinguishes the nocturnal light of human understanding. You leave room for the stupidity and jokes of others. You do not want, O blessed one, of anything from the other, but instead you tend the flowers in your own garden. He who needs you asks you, and, O clever Philemon, I suppose that you also ask those from whom you need something, and that you pay for what you receive. Christ has made men desirous, but forever since it's not but. Okay, I'm starting over. Christ has made men desirous forever since they expect gifts from their saviors without any service in return. Giving is as childish as power. He who gives presumes himself powerful. The virtue of giving is the sky blue mantle of the tyrant. You are wise, O Philemon. You do not give. You want your garden to bloom and for everything to grow from within itself. I praise, O Philemon, your lack of acting like a savior. You are no shepherd who runs after stray sheep, since you believe in the dignity of man, who is not necessarily a sheep. But if he happens to be a sheep, you would leave him the rights and dignity of sheep, since why should sheep be made into men? There are still more than enough men. Okay. Comments here?
Well, that your lack of acting like a savior, you are no shepherd who runs after a stray sheep. The herding cats of a flock.
Yeah.
The shepherd does it. Acting like a savior tries to get other people to do it. The thing is, it's kind of like in the movies, someone says, "Oh, I died for you." It's like, please don't. That's a cop out. You only have to do it once, and they'll leave me with all this grief, and I got to keep going. Why don't you live with instead of die for? So,
Yeah. I just wanted to read again from chapter 1 of the Red Book, page 129. Let's see. I'm sorry. I can make it later. It's earlier. It's not 120. Just a moment. I have to read the end of this. Okay. So now let's listen again to Jung's admonition at the beginning of the Red Book. So at the beginning of all his writing, he makes this admonition, which is echoed in what he was just saying to Philemon. So he says, "Believe me, it is no teaching and no instruction that I give you. On what basis should I presume to teach you? I give you news of the way of this man, but not of your own way. My path is not your path, therefore I cannot teach you. The way is within us, but not in God's, not in teachings, nor in laws. Within us is the way, the truth, and the life. Woe betide those who live by way of examples. Life is not with them. If you live according to an example, you thus live the life of that example. But who should live your own life if not yourself? So live yourselves. The signposts have all fallen. Unblazed trails lie before us. Do not be greedy to gobble up the fruits of foreign fields. Do you not know that you yourselves are the fertile acre, which bears everything that avails you? Yet who today knows this? Who knows the way to the eternally fruitful climes of the soul? You seek the way through mere appearance. You study books and give ear to all kinds of opinion. What good is all that? There is only one way, and that is your way. You seek the path, I warn you, away from my own. It can also be the wrong way for you. May each go his own way."
that reminds me of two.
Well, let me just finish this one sentence. I will be no savior, no lawgiver, no master teacher unto you. You are no longer little children. Okay, go on.
I was going to say the two things it reminds me of is the first one, when Jung says, if your path is easy, you're on somebody else's path. It's right. Life. So, live it and deal with it. And it's challenging, but it's poetic and it's alive. The second piece, it reminds me of the story of grandma's roast. The grandchild is going to impress grandma. I want to do the roast for the holidays this year, and I'm going to cook it just like grandma and see if it's okay, because I want to continue this tradition. And so, the guy goes in and he cuts the ends off the roast and he marinates it and he puts it in the oven and he cooks it. And, grandma takes the first taste and she said, my Lord, this is better than any roast I've ever made. You will carry on this tradition. Thank you. Except, why did you waste a pound of meat cutting the ends off? And he said, well, Grandma, you always cut the ends off. She goes, Sonny, back then, my oven was too small. So, so don't just blindly take someone, I call it the third option. If someone says, oh, here, what's your choice, A or B? Well, I'm going to take the C that I create. I'm not required to pick A or B. So I think that's the, Jung's piece of, stay on your own path and be mindful of the history. I mean, if you don't know why the ends are cut off, then you're doing it for absolutely no reason, and it's actually wasteful.
Yep. So let's see. Richard is doing a little proselytizing here, which I'll share with you. He says, Jesus is the most important chapter in alchemy that most miss. Well, actually, Richard, there are a few other religious figures who also had a role in alchemy. Those who come to mind immediately are the Buddha, about 500 years before Christ, and the prophet, who came 640 years after Christ. So they also were alchemical.
I'd add something I learned a month and a half ago, very recently. Filius Philosophorum, lapis, the philosopher's stone, all of that. It's not lapis lazuli. The lapis meaning the stone. It's numite, which I've never didn't see until about a month and a half, 2 months ago. But it's Nuummite. It's the oldest mineral on the planet, billions, like 3-4 billion years old. And it's indicated that was the numite was actually a philosopher's stone. And the only place it's found is in Greenland. And you'll like this, some spotty spots in Maryland. So that's Pangea at work there, or how Greenland probably lit off there. But numite is a philosopher's stone. So it's kind of a fun field trip to go in and look for numite. It's just this beautiful black stone with almost the whole universe as its inclusions.
So Richard makes the assertion Jesus was a 1/3 of God that incarnated into human flesh and then sacrificed his life without hesitation to prove God's love and sacrifice, like a human sacrifice, to end the human sacrifice of the pagans. Well, actually, Richard, according to all the Abrahamic religions, including Christianity, it was actually Abraham that made the observation that you could sacrifice a goat instead of a human. And so my friend, who's a Jewish rabbi and a former president of the World Union of Progressive Jews, said that Abraham's action was the time of the end of human sacrifice, at least in the Western world. And that was more than 1,000 years before the birth of Christ. So,
and then you can sacrifice and have a feast instead of have a loss.
Yeah.
What page are we on?
We are on the bottom of page 408, I believe.
Okay.
Okay. So
thank you.
We had the eternal wisdom. Oh no, we're at the bottom of 409 because
so we finished. We're
not trying to change sheep into men. Okay, we have enough men. Okay, all right. So let me finish out this section, and then we'll have a discussion. O Philemon, the wisdom of things to come, therefore you are old, oh so very ancient, and just as you tower above me in years, so you tower above the present in futurity, and the length of your past is immeasurable. You are legendary and unreachable. You were and will be returning periodically. Your wisdom is invisible. Your truth is unknowable, entirely untrue in any given age, yet true in all eternity. But you pour out living water, from which the flowers of your garden bloom, a starry water, a dew of the night. What do you need, O Philemon? You need men for the sake of small things, since everything greater and the greatest thing is in you. Christ spoiled men, since he taught them that they can be saved only by one, namely him, the Son of God. And ever since, men have been demanding the greater things from others, especially their salvation. And if a sheep gets lost, somewhere it accuses the shepherd. O Philemon, you are a man, and you prove that men are not sheep, since you look after the greatest in yourself, and hence fructifying water flows into your garden from inexhaustible jugs. Okay. I'm gonna,
I think
go
this,
for it. I'm gonna take a brief bio break. I'll be right back.
Okay. I think that Christ spoiled men. I'm going to change it. Christ spoiled people, since he thought that they can be saved only one by one, namely him, the Son of God. And ever since, people have been demanding the greater things from others, especially their salvation. If a sheep gets lost somewhere, it accuses the shepherd. What I find really interesting here, that sparks a lot of, I think, actionable occurrences that we see with how people operate. Well, the metaphor, son of God, daughter of God, people of God. I mean, you do the piece where, live by his example, people say. I'm like, okay, so I am then divine. I am son of. And the thing is, cool thing about son of or daughter of, it's not child of anymore. It's living of throughout. And then demanding greater things from others, demand greater things from yourself. And then sheep gets lost, accuses the shepherd. Well, you get lost. Well, that's on you. And you don't need to do it alone. But I think that what's interesting is that here, by leading by example kind of thing, the old general that said, oh, there go my people, I must follow them. So it's a community of connection, I think, with self, when you can be saved only by one, you. And it reminds me of, I think, an article I wrote 5 years ago called "Strip Yourself of Salvation." You're always complete, never finished, lifelong. And so I think with that, I don't need to be saved. I'm not in trouble. I'm in life. And so I think there's a metaphor here that's a direct example to translate, not to, oh, I have to look to that dude, that Messiah, that person. He's like, no, that is looking in the mirror. You need to look at yourself, is what I think. This is what the message really is here. And then, hence, fructifying water flows into your garden from inexhaustible jugs. You become that Aquarian water bearer. Will condensate the water magically out of thin air to fill the jug at any time. And then you can travel light. The jug's empty, it's clean. So I think that's, Amela, thoughts on this paragraph?
I'm still stuck on this tower part, because I didn't know that those that they have crystals that are these towers. So I'm not sure if he's speaking about like tower crystals. It's kind of silly, but I guess I'm sort of in the cryptic perspective. I'm trying to understand if he's yes. Well, he's saying that the wisdom of things to come, therefore you are old, oh so very ancient, and just as you tower above me in years, so you tower above me Sorry. So you tower above the present in futurity, and the length of your past is immeasurable. You are legendary and unreachable. So I'm thinking of, what's in the earth as well as what is above the earth. So of the earth would be the pyramids, and there are so many, and there are many to yet be excavated. Just as there was a pyramid of the moon in Bosnia. I haven't had the chance to go and visit, but I would absolutely love to, because that's just phenomenal that there's a freaking pyramid in Bosnia devoted to the moon. So I'm not sure if this towering is of the above or of the below, or of the below to the above, because he is speaking of tend the flowers in your own garden. So tending to those flowers, and the flowers growing, they must first be rooted into the earth to be out into the sky. If I'm not, yeah. So I'm.
I appreciate that you brought that up, because to me, the Colleen Keeber's concept, there's no rootless flower. But I think the towers aren't some abstract above the firmament, below the firmament, deep below in the soul. I think it's we each are that tower when we are connected to that totality of our lineage, that we stand on their shoulders, meaning we stand on the earth, so that then we are ourselves each those towers. And I think that's the way I read it. And I appreciate that you brought it up, because you pulled in the abstract concepts of, as above, so below. But then in a sense, we are each a volcano. And with that concept of the lineage, then my feet are firmly rooted in the abyss, which is the whole past as a volcano. So I think we are each those towers, literally.
So can you rephrase that? How do you perceive the towers?
You, Skip, me, everyone on the YouTube channel, every person on the planet. And I think that we are each that tower. When he says, take care of your own flowers, well, that's take care of yourself. Take care of your blooms. Take care of how you grow.
We are the hopes and fears of all of our ancestors from time immemorial, going back to single cell organisms. We are the symbols of the hopes and fears of all of our ancestors, going back to single-celled organisms. And so in that sense, each of us is a tower. We contain within us that tower, which we shared in certain ways with others. So we recognize ourselves in one another. But, we have a certain amount of differences in us too. And the differences, or the similarities, far, far outweigh the differences. Okay. And I mean, if you just look at going back to genetics here, geneticists say that all human beings are essentially the same, with plus or minus maybe 1%. And so, yeah, there are differences, and those differences have manifested in our different appearances and our different races and so on. But they also we're all towers of all the hopes and fears of all of our ancestors. Now, I want to go back to something Richard said. I'm not going to go into all the YouTube commentary here, but I do want to say one thing, and that is that I say again, I am not proselytizing Jung. Okay. I am not proselytizing Jung. Jung was a flawed man, a person who I might not like, if I knew him in real life. What Jung does for me, and I only share what it does for me, and to the extent that what I have learned and say to you might help you, you have to decide. You're responsible for your own life, not me. But what he has done for me over the years is he has allowed me to understand better what is going on in the world of current events. Okay, I'm a certified social studies teacher in the state of New York. And one of the things that I regret is that we teach social studies or history by dates instead of why did people do these particular things. We very rarely answer the question why. I hope to be certified in the state of Maryland where I live sometime soon. I have provisional certification here, but
The attorney, social studies teacher, philosopher, psychology person.
Whatever.
Yeah. Lieutenant Colonel.
But just as Jung said, I will be no teacher unto you. You take it or leave it. Okay, I'm not proselytizing Jung, and I'm certainly not suggesting that there should be a religion to Jung. He did things in his lifetime that were definitely unacceptable in his lifetime, and are sort of questionable and to me, and yet he also did things that are beyond all other human beings. And I've done plenty of things that I would not suggest to others. Right. And I've learned from those things. And so we're each responsible for our own lives. I'm going to read one more part here while we're still here.
Really quickly before we
Yeah.
do, since I know we're getting close to need to get this section and time and such, but with the history doomed to repeat itself stuff, if you look at your own life and you come up to a situation that cycles around years later in whatever cycle and for whatever reason, and you start to re-experience the same thing before, where before was it betrayal, or was it something that just crushed you, or something that was a magical, any number of things. My joke now is that when I come and I feel like I'm experiencing a similar thing that has happened before, when in terms of the outcome, it's basically the universe saying, hey, I'm going to give you this again. Are you still a dumbass?
Right. Okay. I'm on page 410, and I'm going to read one more segment of this. Are you lonely, O Philemon? I see no entourage and no companions around you. Bacchus is only your other half. You live with flowers, trees, and birds, but not with men. Should you not live with men? Are you still a man? Do you want nothing from men? Do you not see how they stand together and concoct rumors and childish fairy tales about you? Do you not want to go to them and say that you are a man and immortal as they are, and that you want to love them? Oh, Philemon, you laugh. I understand you. Just now I ran into your garden and wanted to tear out of you what I had to understand from within you, from within myself. Okay, let me read that sentence again. I understand you. Just now I ran into your garden and wanted to tear out of you what I had to understand from within myself. Oh, Philemon, I understand immediately I made you into a savior who lets himself be consumed and bound with gifts. That's what men are like, you think. They are all still Christians, but they want even more. They want you as you are, otherwise you would not be Philemon to them, and they would be inconsolable if they could find no bearer for their legends. Hence, they would also laugh if you approached them and said you were as mortal as they are and want to love them. If you did that, you would not be Philemon. They want you, Philemon, but not another mortal who suffers from the same ills as they do. I understand you, O Philemon. You are a true lover, since you love your soul for the sake of men, because they need a king who lives from himself and owes no gratitude for his life. They want to have you thus. You fulfill the wish of the people and you vanish. You are a vessel of fables. You would besmirch yourself if you went to men as a man, since they would all laugh and call you a liar and a swindler, since Philemon is not a man. I saw, O Philemon, that crease in your face. You were young once and wanted to be a man among men, but Christian animals did not love your pagan humanity, since they felt in you what they needed. They always sought the branded one, and when they caught him somewhere in freedom, they locked him in a golden cage and took from him the force of his masculinity, so that he was paralyzed and sat in silence. Then they praise him and devise fables about him. I know they call this veneration, and if they do not find the true one, they at least have a pope whose occupation it is to represent the divine comedy. But the true one always disowns himself, since he knows nothing higher than to be a man. Are you laughing, O Philemon? I understand you. It irked you to be a man like others. And because you truly loved being human, you voluntarily locked it away so that you could be for men at least what they wanted to have from you. Therefore I see you, O Philemon, not with men, but wholly with flowers, the trees and the birds, and all waters flowing and still that do not besmirch your humanity. For you are not Philemon to the flowers, trees, and birds, but a man. Yet what solitude, what inhumanity. Okay.
I love where here the voice has switched from proselytizing to prioritizing self, where it goes from he's not looking up to Philemon. Now Jung is the tower, and he understands the lineage. Oh Philemon, that crease in your face, you were young once. So there's, and so he's starting to see this divine, what do I use? Creature? I mean, this divine being, this, I'm just going to say this wonderful thing, this numinous personality that he's now lockstepped with. He understands then how, taking the humanity and putting it in a golden cage. Well, that's, addiction to certainty. Instead of living, you take the humanity and lock it away so that, but the true one always disowns himself, since he knows nothing higher than to be a man. And so I think in this, he's starting to go to both nothing higher than to be a man, but then to a person, and then to be a person is divinity itself, i.e., aka life. So, as a perspective, I mean, there are plenty of others. So, but
sure. Okay, well, we still have a lot of The Magician to read, and I think there's been plenty to chew on. So Kathy asks, so is Philemon Jung's self? And I would say yes to that.
I would agree.
Yeah,
I would agree.
I mean, that's what he's saying, but he's actually having conversations with Philemon. And that gets really interesting as we get a little farther along here and we get the 7 Sermons of the Dead. Because
yeah,
we
keep going.
we learn how much, I mean, we already know that Jung was a learned man, but he had to be an extremely learned man, and this is when he's like 40, or actually, yeah, it's right around the time he was 40, because he wrote the 7 Sermons, I think, in 2015. So he just turned 40, and he was able to bring out those 7 sermons, which are just mind-stopping. But
I really
anyway.
appreciate that Kathy brought up that point of, is Philemon Jung's self, and that hadn't come to mind. But now that Kathy brought that point up, it's interesting, because if I segue back to what I just said, we see Jung the man becoming Jung the Philemon, uniting with self and not putting him up on a pedestal. It backs me up to Jung and his conversation, even in the picture, I conversing with my imaginal I. Okay, that's 1-to-1. But as the last 2 paragraphs proceeded, I to imaginal I became my I as my thou to Philemon myself. So it raised it got to a higher octave that's not prone to fall, that has expanded. Basically, the volcano grew. It's higher, and it's not House of Cards higher.
Right. And let's just talk about Philemon for a moment, and all of these visions that Jung had. Not all of us, and even me, especially me, I'm not having visions constantly. I don't always have visions, and but I am in contact with my unconscious today, thanks to Jung, and to a lesser extent thanks to Tibetan Buddhism, which I also studied. There's nothing wrong with you if you don't have visions like this, and you don't have creatures you envision that you can talk to. Jung happened to be a very unique guy. He was raised in the Swiss Reformed tradition. His father was a Swiss Reformed pastor, and then he was a fully made psychiatrist even before the Red Book period, long before it. And so he had already been practicing for more than 10 years at the time the Red Book started. And I think most of us in the West have talked ourselves out of dreams and visions. We don't think about them very much, or we have parents who say that, oh, that's nothing, that's just a dream, or if you have a nightmare, oh, don't worry about that nightmare, it's not about you. Well, it is about you, in fact. Right.
Yep.
And just because just because we're afraid of them, we get talked out of them. And if you don't connect with that part of yourself in that way, there's nothing wrong with that. And you know, there are plenty of people who connect with that part of themselves through Christianity, through Judaism, through Islam, through Jainism, through Buddhism, you name it. That's what religions do. They by tradition have developed in an evolutionary fashion to describe certain things in certain ways that resonate. They sound true, so we believe they're true. And you know, I'm thankful to Jung because he helped me sort of come back to Christianity in a way. I mean, because I was so angry when my daughter told me I was going to hell, and I said to myself, you know, who teaches a child to say such a thing to a parent? And I was really ripped about Christianity for a decade, probably. And I was looking for everything I could find that was wrong about it. But then the penny finally dropped, and I realized, you know, you can see my talk, Finding the Living God, in 2019. It's on the homepage of this YouTube channel. And you can see my evolution, something about my evolution, but you can also find something about the history of Western consciousness. And, you know, my way is not your way. I can't find a way, I can't find you a way to accepting your life, okay? Everybody has to take responsibility for their own lives first. You know, there's not a papa in the sky that's going to take care of you, okay? And you know, people, you know, let's take Ukraine for a moment. You know, there's no God that's going to make the war between Russia and Ukraine just magically go away. They're going to have to work through it for themselves. And, you know, so that type of magic does not exist. And so Vladimir Zelensky is sort of the father of his country right now, but like Winston Churchill before him, once the peace is found, he may find himself on the outs, okay, as Winston Churchill did. And very shortly after the end of World War II, Winston Churchill was voted out, and he became prime minister once again, I think in 1952, but he was out for 5 or 6 years after World War II, even though he had been the, you know, the vision of the nation to win World War II for Britain, or, you know, to the extent Britain was a part of that. But, you know, there's no magic person, and there's no magic wand. And, you know, Winston Churchill learned that pretty well.
You know, I'd add to that with Carl Jung's quote of all addiction is bad, whether it's to drugs, alcohol, or idealism.
Right.
And I think that idealism piece of that addiction, which goes back to the addiction to too much certainty, and that doesn't mean don't be specific. Specificity is important, but the clarity of it to me says most ecclesiastical fundamentalists or fanaticists and not even just ecclesiastical. If you get fanatical or fundamentalist about something, I would almost a dime to a dollar 100% bet that if you're a fundamentalist, you have piss poor fundamentals, because you've limited yourself to this one narrow passage of an idea. And honestly, that's fearful guardrails. That's not a garden. That's not alive. I mean, a fence around a garden shows you where the garden is, but you can see through the fence and there's more. So I think when you limit yourself to the one pesky idealism piece, that's poisonous.
Right. I guess we'll call it quits at that point. Let me just look and see. Kathy said that Richard left before I mentioned my reaction to what he had said. That's fine.
It's good to have him here.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the fact of him being here. And the point is that, we each have to find our own way, and Christianity is Richard's way. The fact that he comes here every week and has done for years now, it suggests to me that he has certain doubts about Christianity. And those doubts are reasonable. I mean, I think that Christianity has been sold as something magical, and I think he has doubts and so on. And I think that you have to realize that it's not magical. There's nothing magical about it. It's just a religion. It's a religion that has helped many people over the years. It's also gotten many people crucified over the years.
Yeah, I think there's with Jung, there becomes a weaning off of the poisonous, we know what everything is up here intellectually. It's a capital KNOW in the heart, solar plexus, gut, sacral. I mean, the earth mind, I call it the Gaia mind, where that's our connection to the earth in our body, all of those together, a whole little solar system. But then the addiction to certainty and people wanting to be led around, told what to do is a lazy way to do things. I mean, personally, I think I have two allergies: boredom and starvation. And if I'm here, I don't have either. So
yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
And actually, here's a little parenting piece for people out there that I got from my dad. I think I was 5, and I walked up, and parents will say, I'm not your entertainment system. They'll go through and reason with the kid. I walked up to my dad and said, "Dad, I'm bored." He said, "Wow, that doesn't sound like a very fun thing to have to experience." And he turned around and walked out of the room. Boom. Next time I said I'm bored, he just looked at me and he turned around and walked out of the room. And that was I guess I have to do something about it. So, it's I think those kind of things are important, so that it's not here, let me fix you. You're playing the bird with a broken wing. Well, fix that wing and go fly. I mean, so it's interesting to me with just the process of going through Jung, especially today, because we saw the passage from the imaginal I communicating with Jung to Jung becoming and communicating with Philemon, the higher self.
So nowadays, whenever I'm bored, I now doodle, because I've been taught to doodle by Colleen Kubert, and so I just did a quick 30-second doodle here just to show you. And so the rule is you draw a line. It can be a curved line or whatever, and then draw another line that doesn't like that line, and keep going. And so this is only a 30-second one, but I have one going upstairs. Probably I'll bring it next time. That is very complex, and if you doodle, you will find that you are never bored. Okay, because it is a direct communication with the unconscious, and if you focus on it, you will be hearing yourself think very soon. And I used to think of this as,
Yep, you froze.
and I think you lost me there. So
Yeah, good froze. You said I used to think, and then it stopped.
well, I used to think it was a childish activity to do a doodle like this. I mean, this is nothing special. I everybody has their own mark, so you shouldn't follow mine. But what I do is I say, okay, if one line doesn't like one line, but they can go under one another. And so when I come to two lines, then I can skip to where the line would come out, and so on. So I'm showing that this mass is above this mass, and this mass may be above this mass, and and not that that makes any difference at all, and hopefully nobody will copy my mark. You have to see what yours is, but if you just do some doodling, you'll start to hear yourself think, and then you're communicating with the unconscious.
Yeah, and I love that even I change one word there in how I approach it, where I say draw a line that only knows straight lines, and then draw a line that has no idea of anything about straight lines. And what's interesting is it took, I don't know if it was a year after Colleen put that in that one Participación Mystique series we did several years ago. It just came to me how deceptively simple that exercise she came up with, because now the line is my consciousness and my specificity and my clarity, and the curvy living line is my unconscious, the depths of my soul, the dynamism of life and nature, but they sit in each other. And even so, the line can be spirit and light and public and conscious, and the other curved line is the soul and personal and depth and dark. And it just goes and goes and goes. But I just love draw a line that only knows straight lines. And okay, now draw a line that has no idea about straight lines at all. And okay, so like you said, I thought this was a childish exercise. I thought it was fun. And then a year later, thanks, Colleen, I think I finally got it. It's kind of like this inside joke, because it's so deceptively simple. And then afterwards, you don't even need to know those things. You just doodle.
Yeah. And then what I found, as I said, I'm working on a very complex one, which I'll probably share next week. But let's see. I went out and bought a bunch of colored pens that are all different colors so that I can fill in the different layers. And I've done this with school children at every level, from pre-kindergarten up to 12th grade, and they all basically do the same thing. And they like it okay. But I had one kid who showed me those layers like I'm showing here, like I've shown 3 layers here, perhaps. Okay, this layer is over this layer, but this layer is over that layer. Okay, and so it's a real mind tease. And I had one kid come up with 25 layers in 40 minutes or so. I mean, incredible, incredible. And so you can actually see from a child exactly how complex their mind is, how their mind is built up by this lesson. And so I give this lesson. I'm giving it to my class this week again, and last week I was trying to do it. Unfortunately, I have a class that has only 5 students. I've only met 2 of them so far. The others hopefully will join us tomorrow, but in any case, that's
Nice. Thanks for today.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, sir. And we'll see you next week.
Sounds good.
Peace.